Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to New York State Bridge Authority. Before we start our regular agenda, we have an audit committee meeting with Chairman Roger Higgins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have
I believe, though, maybe we're going to combine the two meetings, right?
Yes, please.
I think we'll combine. So Roger has the largest agenda, so I'll let him carry it, and we'll do the two committee meetings all at once.
So we're going to do the finance and the audit committee, correct?
Right.
All right.
We'll go through I think the first four are the same. So we'll do the first four, I guess.
They are.
All right. Can we have a motion to adopt the minutes of the December 19, 2013 meeting of the audit committee?
So moved. Any discussion? If not, roll call. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And why don't we adopt the minutes of the finance committee meeting at the same time?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? If not, roll call. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Okay, so the agenda's the same going forward.
So the first item on the agenda is the report to the board from Toski and Company. We've all received it in our packets, but we're obviously going to get a little presentation.
Yes, sir, you are. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tim Thomas. I'm from Toski and Company. I'd like to thank you for giving us the opportunity to come and talk to you, because even though the vast majority of our interaction has been with Brian and his staff, at the end of the day, it's really important that you know and that we make it clear that we work for you and we answer to you, because you are, and I guess the 50-cent term for it is you're the group that's charged with governance. Yeah, and the guys that approve the bill, right? More importantly than anything, I suppose. What you have in front of you are a couple different things. You have our auditor's report, which is the big package, and basically included in there are the financial statements. The first thing that you're going to find in there is our independent auditor's report, and basically what that is a letter that gives our opinion on the financial statements. Our opinion is on the second page, and it says that the financial statements present fairly the financial position and results of operations of the authority. The reason it says present fairly and not present exactly is because there's estimates and assumptions that we have to make. If you were looking for an absolute ironclad 100% guarantee, the only guarantee I could make you is that there's probably something wrong in those financial statements. There has to be, because we made estimates and assumptions, and some of those with perfect 20/20 hindsight could be found to be slightly different than what we used in terms of building the financial statements. However, having said that, it's important to know that there's probably nothing different in here from the way we're showing it that would be significant enough to cause anyone to change their opinion on your financial position or condition, which we think is good. When you look at the opinion, there's a whole bunch of paragraphs in there that affix responsibility. We as a profession have tried for probably the last 20 years to make the readers of the financial statements understand exactly what it is we're trying to do. This is our latest stab at it. All the previous ones, quite frankly, we've, as a profession, failed miserably. And basically, this is in response to what this iteration of our attempt is called clarity standards. And you'll see at the beginning, we just assign who's responsible for what. And we tell you that they're your financial statements. And it's your responsibility for them to be right. It's our responsibility to give you our opinion on how right they are. And then we proceed to give you that opinion and tell you that everything's okay. Then we talk about some required supplementary information, which refers to some specific pages, and then there's some other legal and regulatory matters that we have to address. By virtue of the fact that you're a governmental agency, we have two sets of auditing standards that we have to apply. We have to apply generally accepted auditing standards, which is what we would apply in any audit that we would do. If you were General Motors, for instance, we'd apply the same auditing standards to you as we do to them. But then on top of that, we sort of pancake another layer of governmental auditing standards. And those additional requirements are what's addressed in that last paragraph. Following that, on pages 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are the management's discussion and analysis. That is, the concept behind that is that's kind of like the Reader's Digest abridged version about what happened this year, where you're at, how you got there, and kind of where you're going. And we basically walk through in a very high-level analysis of those issues, and you can read that on your own. The thing that I would point out is none of the information that you're going to see in here is any different from the information that Brian has previously provided you. So as you look through here, the numbers that you see and the comments that you see made should very, very closely mirror and be consistent with what you should have expected to see. On page 8, in a governmental world, we refer to it as a statement of net position. It's a comparative statement from one year to the next. To my way of thinking, it's always easiest to see this as a snapshot at a point in time of what you have. The top is the assets, that's what you own, and the bottom is the liabilities and the net position. Net position is equity, and that's how you own it. And when you look at year to year, you can see that most of the numbers are comparative. Cash is down about $4 million, investments are down about $8 million, so there's a $12 million drop there. Okay, where'd it go? Well, we spent quite a bit on rehab and improvement and paid down a substantial amount of debt during the course of the current year. Your cash went where you planned for it to go. That's a good thing. When you look down through there, you'll see that, again, those numbers are very similar to things you've seen in the past. Under non-current liabilities, you'll see accrued fringe benefits. There's roughly $21 million there. That represents the post-retirement benefit obligation, the health insurance, and other fringe-related benefits for people after they retire. Sick and vacation and that kind of stuff is in there too. And then the general obligation, general revenue bonds, which are down about $8 million, which represents about what's paid this year on them. The next page is a statement of revenues and expenses. Again, that's the terminology that's used in the governmental sector. For all intents and purposes, it's the income statement, what you'd see in a for-profit world. Comparative year to year, you'll see that, and as you expected, the toll revenue is very consistent year to year. Other revenue went from $1.8 million down to $600,000. Wow, big jump. Does that mean that something's wrong there? That's the first conclusion you could draw. That's not what happened. As you recall, in 2012, you got a big grant for redecking of the Newburgh Beacon Bridge.
For security equipment.
I'm sorry, for the security equipment. And that's what's in there. That's what's in there. You didn't have that this year. When you go down and look at the operating expenses, salaries line up almost exactly year to year. You don't have a contract. There were no new raises other than the tri-borough step raises, and there was some attrition of your staff due to retirements that weren't replaced. Employee benefits, they're up a couple $100,000 from one year to the next. With payroll being the same, ordinarily you'd say, yeah, those shouldn't be up. But the other post-retirement benefit obligation increase is what accounts for the majority of that difference, and that's why we had that. Under professional services, you're up from $582,000 to $620,000. There was an accrual made at the end of the year to recognize the maximum exposure that you might have with respect to some ongoing litigation. The number that fluctuates the most wildly from one year to the next is the rehabilitation, reconstruction, and bridge repairs expense. That's going to fluctuate wildly from one year to another, depending upon where you are in the cycle of what you have scheduled in your short-term, intermediate term, and long-term repair and rehabilitation plan. And out of the 63, almost 64 million you spent, 34 million of it is right there. That's a big number. We looked at what you spent. We looked at the projects you spent it on. We compared it to what you had in your budget and your long-range plan. And with the exception of things that are beyond your control, weather and the time it takes to get contracts let and negotiated, you're spending that money on what you plan to spend it on. So that, while that's a significant variance from one year to another, it's not indicative of a problem or anything like that. When we get down to the non-operating revenue at the bottom of this schedule, there's, last year there was some arbitrage, that's a hard word to say, and some bond issuance costs that you don't see this year. Well, if you recall, in 2012 you did a large debt issuance. Those are related to that debt issuance. You didn't have one in 2013. Makes sense, they're not there. Similarly, if you look at interest and other expenses, it went from just under $3 million to about $3.7 million. Again, you had that big debt issuance in 12. It wasn't outstanding for the whole year of 12. It was outstanding for the whole year of 13. So there was more debt for more time, hence more interest. At the end of the day, your net position is right where you've still got almost $85 million in equity, which is, I guess, a good position to be in. Now, the one thing you don't see on here is depreciation for your bridges. And when I say your bridges, I want to differentiate the walkway over the Hudson from the spans that carry vehicles. With respect to infrastructure assets, which those bridges are considered to be, you are afforded the opportunity to either depreciate those bridges or to use what they call a modified approach and to maintain them at a certain level. In this particular case, a Category 5 level. And all of those repairs that are necessary to rehabilitate, repair, or maintain those bridges at that level become period costs. And that's the $34 million that we just referenced. So that number kind of is there in lieu of depreciation from a theoretical perspective. And spending that $34 million did enable you to maintain the condition of the bridges at the level that your policies had suggested that were required to be maintained, so that you could continue to appropriately use that policy to account for those bridges. And I guess that's an awful lot of words to say you're following your policy with respect to what you were doing for your bridges.
One question. Does the asset value of the bridges, assuming that they're maintained at level 5 forever, does the asset value increase as it might for another, like a house or a car?
No, it's not like if you were in the for-profit world and you had a factory and you put a new roof on it, you would increase the value of that building. In this particular case, no.
So our insurance doesn't increase either.
Well,
Insurance is based on replacement value.
Right.
and
Right.
there's a big
Construction
difference.
is
on replacement.
Replacement value is
Exactly,
not
so the
reflected.
asset must increase then.
And
The asset
Construction
value.
to replace it increases, therefore the asset gets a value based on that, but it's not because the asset went up.
And-
There's
and
no-
that's
I
what-
was just curious about that.
There's no
in your
accounting
finan-
entry made with respect to that, but on an annual basis, we do, evaluate the bridges, we readjust the
Yeah,
cost to repair them, and we readjust our insurance every single year,
Right.
almost every year it goes
Last
up.
meeting,
But-
you
but
guys
we-
moved
You
money
just did that.
to the insurance
Yes.
fund.
But I mean, it was just curious that
Yes.
if your asset
We
If you
carry
were-
them at historical cost, though, that's why. Which gets
We're
kind
a
of interesting.
not-for-profit. If we were a for-profit entity, that wouldn't be the case. It would be accruing some values. But
Okay.
because we're a not-for-profit, we're not.
We never do a mark-to-market on the bridges. Okay, it's carried at historical cost under the accounting guidelines that allow us to use this modified approach.
And you are squarely within the parameters of acceptability for the continuation of the application of that approach. So the only time that would change is if maybe you added a lane to a bridge, or maybe you made one a second span, or if you had something like they're talking about in the city.
And improve some element, some functional element of it, we would consider revaluing, but all the rehabilitation and reconstruction that we do, that would not be the case.
The next page is a statement of cash flows, and this one has real relevance because it helps you to understand where your cash went. This particular year, you lost money, but your cash didn't go down by the same amount. And basically, all the positive numbers show where your cash came from, and all the negative numbers show where your cash went. Well, when you look at it at the top, you'll see that payments to contractors went from $20 million last year to $32 million this year. So you used $12 million more cash this year than you did last year. All things being equal, where'd that come from? You liquidated almost $8 million worth of investments, and you used $4 million worth of cash. That's where it came from. Were that situation to have occurred unexpectedly, that'd be something that I think you as a board would have some concern about. But the thing to remember is last year you issued a big debt issuance with the anticipation that you were going to spend that money. This year you spent that money. So the results of operations fall squarely in line with what you expected was going to happen. So while on the face it could be considered to be alarming that you had a loss and your cash went down, when you look at your plan and why you got to where you are, you're where you plan to be. The only variable that you have in terms of that is how much your repair and rehabilitation costs are. And while a lot of that remains within your control, some of it just quite frankly doesn't. You can't paint in the rain, for example. The following pages are the notes to the financial statements. And I mentioned that you had two different ways that you can choose to address depreciation with respect to your bridges. There's a number of other things that you have different options as to how you can choose to account for certain items in the financial statements. And basically these notes to the financial statements provide perspective on what those choices may have been when they were made. And this isn't our opportunity as auditors to attempt to earn a Pulitzer for waxing poetic. Most of the stuff that's in here is in here because they are required disclosures. If there was anything in here that was really out of the ordinary, I would call your attention to it, and there really isn't. There's a couple things that are kind of interesting. If you go over to page 17, there's a comparison of the cost and the market value of the investments that you maintain. The good news is the market value exceeds the cost. When it doesn't, that's not a good thing. So in this particular instance, you aren't losing equity of the authority by virtue of your investments going south. And then you have funds that are held for various restricted purposes. We described that at the bottom of page 17 in note 5. Some of those restricted purposes are because they are stipulated in some of your bond indentures. And you are where you need to be with respect to all of those requirements. And this provides that assurance for the lenders. And then there's a whole bunch of additional disclosures about capital assets that follow. Most of that stuff is stuff you've seen before, and nothing really significant jumping out at you. Page 21, 20, at the bottom of 20 and over on 21, we talk about the outstanding bond indebtedness. And I think the most interesting thing there is on the middle of page 21, we detail the maturities for the first 5 years and then in 5-year increments thereafter, which kind of gives you a snapshot perspective on what your cash needs are going to be with respect to debt service going forward. And that helps the reader of the financial statements evaluate where we're going to be in a cash position. And then on page 23, we talk about the post-retirement benefit obligations. That's the promises to your retirees to pay for their health insurance costs after they retire. And that's a big number. It's a big number for everybody. And one of the reasons why we started, why the ivory tower academicians in my profession decided that we needed to record and present this number is because it was a big number. And the theory is, if an employee works for you for 30 years and then retires and gets a benefit, that benefit that they earned or that they got after their retirement was earned over their working career. And there's a whole bunch of actuarial, I call it mumbo jumbo because I don't understand it, it's easier, that goes into determining what that liability is on an actuarial basis and how it's earned. And incrementally, you're going to recognize that liability. It's going to go up, 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 up as your retirees age, and then down as they term out and take that benefit. Most of the rest of the stuff in there is straight up boilerplate. On page 26 is a required supplementary schedule that discloses the bridge assessments. Because you use the modified approach, it's important that we disclose where they are in terms of where you aim for them to be, and this schedule provides that required disclosure. On page 28 is another required supplementary disclosure. Quite frankly, it adds absolutely nothing to your financial statements, but it's required, so we put it there. And that relates to that post-retirement benefit obligation. And basically, its whole purpose is to see how that plan is funded. Well, you're not funding it. You're funding it on as a pay-as-you-go basis, which is what almost everybody else does. But in the event that you were funding it, there would be a value in that actual value of assets column.
If we were to fund it, what would the annual payment have to be for future retirees?
It'd be pretty significant.
Oh, that number.
I don't.
Right now, the annual increase is approximately $2 million.
Yeah, but that's for people who are already retired.
Well, that's the actuarially assessed value, present value of everybody,
Oh.
retired
Of the
and not
current
retired.
amount.
That's the present value of the future liability.
Right. So it's effectively that the balance here for 12/31 is $44 million.
Yeah.
So if you were to look at it as a liability that we had to fund, we would have to put $44 million out and then a continuing about $2 million a year until the situation or data factors change that would reduce or increase that liability. Then you would also experience ups and downs associated with, obviously, you would
Investments and
take that
everything
money, you would invest in
Right.
it.
But it also assumes that everybody who's working for us is going to work to retirement and is going to be entitled to the benefit.
Yep.
And obviously that doesn't happen.
No, nobody does it here.
It's really interesting because the way they even come up with that liability, I facetiously call it mumbo jumbo. They basically look at you today and say, you are a 30-year-old employee and you're going to work until you're 62 and then you're going to retire. So in 32 years, how much is it going to cost to provide you insurance? So they project a trend of how much it's going to go up every year, which is guess number one. And after they project that, then they say, okay, how much do I have to put away today to provide for that portion of that you earned this year? And then they take an assumed earnings percentage, and then they do like a reverse annuity and ratchet it back down. So you got a guess on a guess. And
These guesses are basically applied, I believe there's a state standard that they use for a number of the assumptions in computing it. So it's not as if everybody goes out and does their own. There are a number of
That's why
standards.
it's unfunded everywhere.
and then there's a guess as to the likelihood of you staying to retirement, and the longer you work in the closer you get to retirement, the more likely it is you're not going to change your job. And then some people are going to die before or whatever, and that so there's all those actuarial estimates in there, and then there's whatever fudging that can happen, and I guess I point that out because those of you that have been around for a while remember back in the day the contribution to the employees' retirement system, which was actuarially determined, was at one point 0.03%.
Right.
And now it's what?
15.
15, 16. Sometimes it's been as high as 20.
Right.
You know, so
Based on 5.
so the same volatility could come into play here. So the fact that you're treating it on a pay-as-you-go basis is probably reasonable. After we get through that required supplementary information, we come to another opinion. That's not because we're stuttering. It's because you are subject to generally accepted governmental auditing standards. And basically, we have to look at your internal controls and your compliance with laws and regulations. Internal controls, that's a fancy word. That means the checks and balances, the policies and procedures you have in place to make sure that the money goes where you mean for it to go, and none of it slips out without your knowledge. So the things that you have in place to safeguard your assets. And if we had any problem with any of that stuff, this is where we would be telling you. We don't have any problems like that. And then compliance with laws and regulations, there may be something that would have a financial implication were you to not be in compliance. We didn't see any of that. And then there's another opinion, because you're a state authority, we have to opine on your investment program compliance. And basically we go through and look at your investment program and make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing in that area. And we would tell you about it right here. One of the things that you don't see in this opinion, in this report, is a single audit. A single audit is required when you expend more than $500,000 worth of federal funds in any given year.
Last year, we had a single audit because we were required to, as we received more than the $500,000 amount. For 2013, we do not have a single audit. It was originally identified in the engagement letter that we would, but because we didn't spend to the threshold amount, it's not present this year.
And we did break out the incremental cost of single audit separately in our engagement letter, so our fee will be adjusted to account for the fact that we didn't actually do that. But that's why you won't see one of those. When you also have two other pieces of correspondence, and the reason you have those is when those guys down in Houston misbehaved at Enron, one of the things that one of the repercussions was the notion that all happened because the communication between the auditors and the board wasn't as good as that could have been. So there's two pieces of required communication. We're required to either communicate them to you orally or in writing. If we communicate them to you orally, then we have to write a memo that talks about what we discussed. Figure the odds of me remembering to do that by the time I get back to Buffalo. That ain't going to happen. So, the first one, it says report to the board at the top. And basically, we go through and make sure that we communicate a number of items. Any significant accounting policies. If there were any new ones, we would tell you about it in here. You didn't. You didn't adopt any new ones this year. The ones that are significant, we describe in Note 2 to the financial statements. The next one is accounting estimates. What's in there that's a big deal, that if the estimate was wrong, would be really significant to your financial statements? And this is where we talk about that. And the big one really relates to the condition of the bridges, maintained in meta condition 5. Any significant disclosures, if we have to represent that the disclosures in the financial statements are neutral. If we had any problems during the course of the audit, if we asked Brian for something and he said, no, I'm not giving it to you, then that could rise to the level of a scope limitation, and we have to tell you about it. He didn't do that. Your staff was really cooperative. They got nothing to hide. They were very transparent. They made our job very easy. Corrected and uncorrected misstatements. That means that we find something wrong, and if we did Brian talk us out of fixing it? No, we didn't find anything wrong, and no, Brian didn't talk us out of trying to fix it. Disagreements with management. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes there's something in the financial statements that we say should be this way, and management is adamant that it shouldn't be that way. We have to tell you about it if we have a situation like that. We didn't have any of those. We asked for a management representation letter. I sometimes facetiously refer to them as the lie, cheat, and steal letter, because basically you give us a letter that says we didn't lie, cheat, or steal, and if we did, we told you about it. It takes about 3 pages, but if you read it, that's about what it says. And we didn't have any problem getting that from your management, and they didn't have any problems with any of the representations we asked them to make. Management consultations with other independent accountants. Sometimes they'll go out and opinion shop or get a second opinion on something to try to convince us. If we become aware of that, we're supposed to let you know. To our knowledge, that didn't happen. Then other findings and other information that's in the financial statements, that's just mandatory disclosures, and there's nothing there that you need to worry about. Everything that's in here is boilerplate and addresses what went on. The other letter you got is there's another auditing standard that basically says if we found anything wrong in your internal controls or anywhere else, we're supposed to tell you. This letter says we didn't. It talks about what a deficiency in internal control is, and it differentiates between a deficiency in internal control, which is like a problem that could make something happen, and a material weakness, which is a big hole where something could spill out. And if we found some of those things, we're supposed to tell you that. And in this letter, we're positively affirming to you that we didn't see that and we didn't find it. So those are encouraging. There's nothing that I'm not telling you that we're worried about. And we think that your management has effectively implemented the policies and procedures that you've put in place to safeguard the assets of the authority.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, just one question. Tim, on page 15 of the report itself,
Yes, sir.
capital assets,
Yes, sir.
wondering why the walkway over the Hudson structure is only depreciated over 20 years, where our bridges are probably much greater and buildings are 30 years.
Because at the time, the authority made a decision based on consulting with the engineer. Depending upon, obviously, the lifespan of the improvements that were made, a decision was made, again, in conjunction with the engineer, to depreciate the bridge, whereas the vehicle bridges, the bridge system itself, obviously has a perpetual life. There is no real grading scale to go and apply to that bridge. So to try to use the modified approach to depreciation for it, it was determined at that time it wasn't feasible to do so. So what we did was we took, upon acquisition in 2010, the value as donated to us and then depreciated over 20 years based on some assumptions as developed with the engineer.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
And that's really good. That's really a good question, and that's a guess. flat out, it's a guess. We could have picked 30, we could have picked 40. I guess at the end of the day, what we really picked, since it was donated, probably doesn't make that much difference. But it's just flat out an estimate.
No, anything else? So, can I have a motion to accept the report? Move. Second?
Second?
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That was both
We're gonna
committees
submit it later,
combined?
Write this on the form.
Yeah, this is going to the complete board later.
Right.
Well, the actual report itself is the auditors, the committees accept it. The board and the committees will approve and accept the Section 2800 report and the other reports that follow on to this. Okay? Tim, you want to stay for the rest of the committee, or?
It's their pleasure. You let me know what's your druthers are. I
Board
can,
doesn't have any more questions.
I'll just excuse myself and you guys can continue on.
Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, it's
Thank you.
probably the most thorough explanation of the report we've ever had.
Well, thank you.
Good.
Thank you, Frank.
Okay, to go through this.
So we won't fire the executive director right away.
Yeah, he's good for another month.
There's a resolution attached.
Thank you.
Yes.
So you have to
Still have a joke.
Yes.
I will be over to the board.
Exactly.
Just open. Have spring
Then why
time
don't you
off.
think I don't look at these ahead of time?
Didn't say that, just try.
I know.
You
All
want
right.
to pay you, Roger? Yeah. It's in your hands. Let's go. Joe wants to leave.
Next is the annual report per section 2800 of the Public Authorities Law. There is a resolution attached, so I need a motion.
I'll move.
Second.
Second.
Discussion, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Then we have the 2013 Annual Investment Report, which also has a resolution attached. Need a
So
motion?
moved.
Motion made, second.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution passes. Then we have the 2013 Internal Auditor's Report for review. There's no resolution attached to this. Motion to accept it.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution, yes, review passes. And then we have the 2014 Internal Auditor Engagement with a resolution. We need a motion to
So
accept the
moved.
resolution. Made.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution passes. Then we finally have the Independent Accountant Services Audit of Year-End 2014 Financial Statements. Again, there is a resolution attached to this, so I need a motion.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution passes. Is there any other business? Seeing none? Motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Made. Second.
Second.
Meeting adjourned, Mr. Chairman.
Rob, you want to close your finance committee meeting?
Now, if there's no other business for the finance committee, right, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment of the finance committee.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? None? So that concludes our finance.
Alrighty, now we'll start our regular board meeting on March 20th, monthly meeting. On my left-hand side, we have Commissioner Rod Dressel. We have Commissioner Zane Lashua. We have Assistant Executive Director Tara Sullivan. We have Roger Higgins, Commissioner. We have Commissioner Joseph Romaglia. We have Carl Whitbeck, our counsel. And we have our Executive Director, Joseph Ruggiero, and myself, Richard Jerrington. With that, approval of the February 20 minutes with one amendment.
Move to accept the minutes as amended.
Second.
Any discussion? If not, roll call on the amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Now, motion on the minutes themselves with the amendment.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? If not, roll call. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We have next, administration.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon,
Robert.
Okay.
The first item under administration is a renewal invoice for our membership in the International Bridge Tunnel and Turnpike Association for 2014. It's based on our audited toll revenue, and they apply a rate to that. And this year's dues amount is $23,106. So I have a resolution to go ahead and pay that invoice.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Where's the convention this year?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Well, they have several of them, but, yeah. The next three items, I'll go through them individually, but the next three items are part of that annual submission that we have to Albany on reporting various procurements and disposals and so forth. The first one is the annual prompt payment report. It's a very short report because this year we had no late payments through 12/31, so it's a null report that we'll be filing. And there's a resolution to go ahead and accept that.
Second.
Any discussion? If not, roll call. All in favor, say aye.
The second item is the annual procurement report. This is a report where we have to list any contracts we entered into during the year over $5,000 or that were ongoing from previous years that were still open. This report, again, gets sent to various departments and legislative committees under the Public Authorities Law. And this spreadsheet is listed by vendor and contract types and so forth. There's a whole host of required information that's asked for, and we upload this in a bulk upload into the state's financial system. Is this available online at our website? Or?
I believe we will post it on our website. We typically do.
We post it on our website. I believe some of it will be available from the public intelligence on Paris.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Discussion, roll call. All in favor, say aye.
The third item, third annual report, is a report on a listing of our real property and as well a list of any property that was disposed of during the fiscal year that had a fair market value greater than or equal to $5,000. Although we did get rid of some personal items this year, none of them were to that level. We didn't have an auction, so we didn't get rid of any vehicles this year. So again, this will be a null report that goes into that system. The second part, you'll see that there were two resolutions attached. The second part is to accept the guidelines as they are for disposal procedures. They haven't changed year over year. And also to designate someone to be responsible for disposals. And typically you've addressed that through my title, and that's I'm listed as the contracting officer in the last resolution.
So moved.
Second.
We're taking both the resolutions together. Making a motion on both of them, correct?
Correct. Second. Both
Second.
resolutions.
Any discussion? If not, roll call. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. And the last item that I have is a procurement for a payroll service provider. 3 years ago, if you remember, we went out to bid on to outsource our payroll services. At the time we got 3 bids, one from the current vendor, GTM Payroll Services out of Clifton Park, and 2 were from larger vendors, ADP and Paychex. So we did a review over the last 3 years of the performance of GTM. We're quite satisfied. I won't go through my entire memo here, but if you've had a chance to read my memo, there are a whole host of reasons here why we would like to retain GTM going forward. Not the least of which are, a whole host of transition challenges, not only in terms of financial, but in terms of staff. We have to, operate with a front end system that they provide us, and it took quite a while for us to work the bugs out of that and become used to it. And
And so what I'm requesting of the board is to designate a 5-year single source provision, which we can do under state guidelines, to single source this contract on a year-by-year basis for 5 years to GTM Payroll Services. So we would issue them a purchase order each year, pending a review of the prior year, and that everything is, they're still performing well. They've
Obviously, you've had no complaints from employees.
no, we haven't had any complaints. We've, any minor issues they've been able to address very well with us, because you're dealing with a small company. So when we contact them, we're contacting the same representative that's assigned to us each time. You're not getting somebody new that you have to explain a problem to. They're for this next year, they're holding their pricing constant with this past year. That's their proposal. Since the first year, they've reduced their rates from their standard pricing 10, 12.5, and 15%. So now we're at that 15% discount, which they're going to hold for us for the next year. So with all that information, I'd like to request that we award a 5-year single source, 1-year purchases. Renewals.
Every 4 years.
Right.
Move the resolution.
It'll be the same price every year?
The price is subject to change because they've held it now. This is their standard pricing was dated from 4 years ago. So we did say that we would consider, negotiating price going forward, but they said that they would hold the 15% discount this year. I suspect that what they would do is raise their standard rates to all their customers and then apply the 15% discount to that, which would seem reasonable to me. But we'll address it each year.
We review that annually to see if the price changed considerably. When we went out a few years ago to look at it, they were far and away the best deal.
But we would have the option, if we don't like the price, not to renew that contract.
Absolutely. We're going to run on a year-to-year basis. The big issue with this is its transition time. If we were to choose another vendor, when we switched to this, it was a 3 to 4 month lead time to actually make it work.
So there's a cost indirectly if you transition.
The contract's been running from April to April 1st to March 31st, and I projected that this year's costs were about 11.3. So, we're getting I think we're getting a really good price for the amount of service that they're providing to us.
I don't think anyone's questioning that.
Yeah.
Questioning what the future might hold.
Right. And that's why I wanted to do it as 1-year terms, so we could authorize
Of
it.
course, they've staggered it just enough because your year is from January 1 till December 31st, right?
Well, I think the timing of us going April 1 is just coincidental.
Right.
It had nothing
Right.
to do with the calendar year.
Right. We actually awarded the contract in December of 2010, but we weren't ready for them to start processing payrolls until April. And they didn't charge us anything for all that transition time.
The transition time took longer than we had anticipated when we went out the door in 2011. Had we been able to execute the conversion as quickly as we would like, we would have started January 1. That there isn't any real issue as far as calendar year and executing the contract that way. If we were to go and choose any particular month, it's feasible, although not desirable, but still feasible to transition within a year.
If we were to bring all this internally, just to
It was $150,000. That's why we went out the door.
right, and that it was $100 an employee a year. That's basically what we're paying them. It's another, or less.
All right, any other discussion? If not, roll call. Oh, you moved it, right? So-
Yeah, it's been so long, I forget.
I need a second. Second. Discussion, roll call, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Next, Bill, engineering.
Well, good afternoon. You're not too tired at this point. One of our longer agendas before I get to sit down. I have a pretty short agenda. First item is our contract for maintenance of our cameras and traffic control equipment with TransDigm. They've been very responsive this year to repairing deficient equipment, and there's a lot of paper here. And they're proposing a modest 3% increase over last year's contract, even though we've added a fair amount of equipment with Project Night Watch over the course of the last 12 months.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Next up, just a few months ago, there was a pretty bad accident with one of our trucks. Our truck was rear-ended, and the insurance vendor took a look and totaled the truck, so we'd just like to replace the truck from Bear Mountain, truck 312. And we've selected Henderson Ford, who's a certified MBE vendor from the state contract.
So moved.
Second. Discussion? Roll call, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thanks. Next up is two vans primarily used by the IT department. We'd like to try one of these new Ford cargo vans. Maybe you've seen them on the road, the Ford Transit. Got a lot of storage capacity and pretty flexible in its use. The second van, we'd like to use a Dodge Caravan, again for its flexibility. Sometimes we'd like to transport people rather than just stuff. Again, one of the two vendors is a MBE. The Dodge Caravan is from Maine Motor Car, which was on state contract, but it was not a W or MBE vendor. So that'll be 7 out of the 8 vehicles we bought this year through WMBEs.
So moved.
Second. We're doing both resolutions?
Yes.
Yep.
All right. On both resolutions, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next up, Pure Technologies has an annual contract with us to monitor the acoustic monitoring equipment installed on the Bear Mountain Bridge main cable. They've held their annual service fee for monitoring for about 13 years running. And again, they're asking for $30,000 to evaluate all the sounds that come out of the cable and let us know if any of them indicate a potential oil break.
Which is taking the place of that wooden wedge you used to.
Well, we still go in there every, we're on like a 7-year cycle at this point because things have been very stable since we did the cable rehabilitation at Bear Mountain in the year 2000. We've had about 11 breaks in 14 years. So with out of 7,252 wires, we feel we've addressed the active corrosion and things are very stable, or have been very stable for the last 14 years.
So is the data shared, that they get from us, shared internationally on suspension bridges, so that is there some sort of research issue that goes on? That
not outside of the
commendable.
conferences that I would present it at, that there isn't any online access to the
Like
information.
drillers do, measuring
Right.
geologic things.
Yeah, no, at this point, everybody holds the information confidential, but, we have shared with other suspension bridge operators over the years, and both the MTA and the Maryland Department of Transportation are both using the same acoustic monitoring system on their facilities.
Piece of equipment.
Yeah, it was developed really for the oil pipeline coming out of Alaska, places that it's hard to go do an inspection on. Of course, our cables, you can only see the outside, you can't really see what's going on inside. So, and it was expanded to the parking garage world where you got pre-stressed concrete with steel cables inside the concrete, again, that are inaccessible for inspection, but if they fail, the parking garage comes down in a hurry. So the technology has been around across industry for quite a few decades, and we were the first prototype installation back in year 2000, and they brought in a second system just last year, fiber optic driven communications as compared to coaxial cable, and both systems are basically installed to help them evaluate the performance of their systems. We didn't have to pay for either one of them, but we do pay for the monitoring, which turns out to be, I think, a very good value and helps everybody sleep at night. Looking at a cable from 1924, still
Get a discount on
safe and
insurance
sound.
for that?
Well, I don't know, maybe Brian could look into that. It certainly is a enhancement that we think is quite worthwhile.
I move the resolution.
Move, second.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And then our final item is the jobs in progress. Not a lot of number changes on this month's sheet, but the contractor, Kiska, has come back to work on both the paint contract as well as the deck replacement contract at Newburgh
Back on the
this week.
Newburgh.
Yeah, they both restarted this week, and be a little bit of a slow start, but by April we'll be back in full swing. There's a resolution attached.
Bill, I know that you leased a machine to do the potholes on the bridge. How's that working out?
Well, we just leased it for that one night. We were pleased with it. We're going to lease it again for the month of April. So we're going to share that up and down the system. It's certainly a lot faster and a lot safer, a lot less men in the road. And again, this time of year, temporary patches seem to be even more temporary than what we'd like, but they are getting us through the hump here of the spring weather.
Thank you. Anything else? If not, thank you, Bill. Next.
Did we vote on the reports?
Oh, on the reports, I'm sorry. Moved by,
No one.
Nobody
We gotta
did.
move.
Oh,
Jobs in
moved.
progress.
moved second.
Thank you, Roger.
Any discussion? Roll call. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Good afternoon. Okay.
Brian?
First up, investment report for investments, routine for the month, all reflected in the investment inventory report. Right now, maintenance and construction are at $86 million total, $3 million in cash and $500,000 in cash in the revenue fund. Yield is back to roughly 0.36%.
Move the resolution.
Second. Discussion. Roll call. All in favor, say aye.
Okay, next up, the annual investment report, independent accounts, which includes the independent accountant's report, the investment guidelines, which have not changed, and a record of investment income and cost related to investment income for 2013, all of which are required as part of the Paris reporting.
So moved.
Second. Discussion. If not, roll call. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
This again, next item is the annual report for Section 2800. This again, like the investment report, is reported in Paris. It's also sent to the heads of the Senate and Assembly for the state. This includes various reports, most of which are derived from the annual report provided and reviewed with Toski during the committee meetings. Nothing else much in excess in terms of there were no changes to policies like code of ethics or lobbying policy. This is just an annual approval and acknowledgement.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Discussion. If not, roll call. All in favor, say aye.
Okay, next up, the 2014 internal auditor engagement. This is an extension. Originally, we went out with a 3-year with a 2-year option, with the option to extend for 2 additional years. This is the first of the two extensions. We're pretty happy with their results, and they've maintained the same price as required in the original RFP.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Roll call. All in favor, say aye.
Lastly, Toski, the contract for 2014, they also were on a 3-year with 2 additional 1-year extensions. They've agreed to maintain the same fee, which they have for not only this contract, but also the prior contract for 2014, and the engagement letter is attached.
So moved.
Second. Roll call. All in favor, say aye. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you very much.
Greg,
Good afternoon.
how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. How's everybody?
Good, thank you.
Good. I just got one item today. We're looking to perform a network infrastructure upgrade. Last year you had approved procurement of a enterprise switch for Mid-Hudson. This is a device that all of the computers and network gear tie into, allows routing of information from device to device. This year we are looking to upgrade the remaining equipment across the authority. Equipment in place now is anywhere from 11 to 14 years old. The new equipment will afford us better security, easier manageability, and a consolidation of multiple devices. We received quotes from Verizon and from a second company, Anise and Associates. Both companies are on the OGS state contract. Anise's WBE, and came in with the lowest price of $116,152. We're coming to the board requesting $120,000. The additional $3,847 is for incidentals such as fiber optic wire and cable.
So moved. Second. Any questions? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg. Mr. Ruggiero?
Executive Director's expense report. There are no expenses to report in February 2014. The next report is the February 2014 traffic and revenue analysis. And as expected, February we saw a big hit in both numbers and revenue due to the very bad inclement weather we had in the month. And traffic is somewhat down. We're seeing trending down, so it's going to be interesting to see what the year holds out for us. So we're off to a little bit of a rough start in 2014. And Easy Pass sales, we got the Easy Pass sales report. And the last thing we have to go through is the fiber optic lease program cash flow. So we have a memo from John Belushi to me, for some copied on, that basically shows we are now at a point where the investments we made in the dark fiber program are actually been repaid, and now we're just making sure revenue for these already based off the investments, which is good news. Any new contracts we get on, either on the Mid-Hudson Bridge or the Newburgh Beacon Bridge, will be just straight revenue into the coffers.
You just read what the amounts will be in the future.
Yep. Future leases at either bridges, Mid-Hudson Bridge and Newburgh Beacon Bridge, can be expected to most likely be entirely revenue, with no additional capital costs likely. And we're expecting, hopefully, to have a net profit of $1.278 million over the next 8 years. So it's pretty good leveraging of our assets there. So. Any questions?
No questions? Next, we have new business is 6-month CIP review.
Yep, we got the capital plan. Brian and Bill.
We're a tag team, man.
Yeah, well, it's
It's
me
a
against...
collaborative effort by many departments.
Right. The capital program does involve all different departments. And of course, I get to spend the money and Brian gets to dole it out, so we're both here.
More like Brian can tell him how much he can spend and Bill tries to
right, squeeze some more.
Right.
And based on the reports you just heard, revenue is down, somewhat below our projections. So we've taken the liberty of adjusting the program to reflect a little bit slower cash flow. One of the projects, the larger project that we had on the program for this year up at Rip Van Winkle, we're going to delay for a year to bring our cash flow into balance. So that was the...
I'm sorry, to follow up on that. In the last page of the document, you'll see a document that we typically prepare annually, which is a 20-year projection as to what our maintenance, reserve, and construction fund balances will be. We do a 6-month review now where twice a year we take the capital program and we reevaluate it. We put some what we consider to be realistic assumptions in here, but obviously we would continue to monitor it for any fluctuations as far as revenue or other assumptions that may change. And obviously we would continue to make incremental adjustments when we come back to the board in August as needed.
Any questions? Bill, delaying it a year, is that any problems?
Well, we'll just do a little more maintenance. That's 1991 vintage sidewalk and railing, so we're in the young 20s. It's not an antique just yet, but we are seeing some corrosion, so we'll address that with our in-house forces.
Anything else?
Is there a resolution with that?
We need to take any
Move to adopt, please.
So moved by Roger, second by Vinnie. Any discussion? Roll call, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One item in decline.
Yeah, well, nothing, no presentations to the board, all business. Nothing else, I would entertain a client privilege session, attorney-client privilege session.
We're not going to return.
All right, so we're going to close the meeting.
So moved.
So moved, you sure?
Yes.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion on that? No? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Have a nice month.